Well, Scott, it's fun to reverse the seats. Last time you and I talked, you were the podcast host with your brand new podcast, and this time I get to interview you on lead culture. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited about it. I haven't sat in this seat for a little while. It used to be that this is all I did. We launched the podcast, and I feel like I've only sat in the host seat lately. So I'm super excited about this. It'll be a lot of fun.
It's good. I know, like, and while we're there, we might even have you go ahead because you just launched the podcast, hit the Apple Top 100. Like, tell everybody a little bit about the podcast you host, so they've got that info.
Yeah. So it's called The Secrets of the High Demand Coach. Jenni's, whenever this airs, I'm not sure, but as of the time that we're recording this, Jenni's episode just went live and was a smashing success. But it's really for entrepreneurs, both in the nonprofit and the for-profit world, right?
Yep.
So folks that have started organizations, they're growing them, they want to scale them. What I've found is that's a really hard journey to take alone, right?
Yeah.
And we might even touch on this, but I tried for years as a business owner to figure it out myself, and tried the coaching thing a couple of times, had really bad experiences, and felt like coaching's broken. It's just,
Sure,
and
right.
now I am a coach, which is the great irony of the whole thing. But what I realized, I ended up getting a really great coach, just radically transformed my life. And I was like, where has this been on, like what's going on here? And so what I found after that, fast forward now being a coach, I talk with CEOs and, again, for-profit, nonprofit world all over the country. And time again, I kept hearing about these bad coaching experiences that folks are having. I started asking, like, okay, around the room, how many people have had a coach, right? And most people have, right? It's not like it's this foreign concept. Most people have had a coach. And I say, how many of you have had a bad experience with a coach? And it's like 9 out of 10.
Ouch.
And it's, it's like, if we don't do something as a coaching profession, like we're going to be the next attorneys, sorry, attorneys, I love you. You're wonderful people. But it has the propensity to be that. And I realize all these people are having bad coaching conversations. And the result of that, everyone loses. Coach loses a
Right.
client. That's
Yes.
obvious. But the client ends up like me, feeling like if I can't figure it out, nobody can. Right. And we end up walking the road alone, and it's just entirely unnecessary. So, well, I've had the chance to talk with several hundred like just great coaches over the last couple of years, and realize there's so many of them out there, but many of them, even though they're great coaches, were struggling to find people. And so what I want to do is really bridge those worlds again and say, hey, these are people that are amazing. These are great coaches. Yep. And I wanted to show people what great coaches looked like. So when they go out to find somebody, it's not just like, well, I have to hire a coach. Like, who's your coach? I'll take them. But they can go out and make an informed decision. So that's a really uninteresting way of saying I've gone out, I've found a bunch of amazing coaches, and I've talked them into giving us their biggest, best secret, like their best advice.
I love it.
And we give it to everybody for free. So it's a lot of fun. It's been an amazing project. We've just had some wonderful, wonderful people on the show. And like you mentioned, we had Apple's Top 100 in the first 2 days of launch, actually. And it's just been a super, super cool project.
That's fun. That's fun. Well, I love that. Yeah. And I'm excited to listen to some more of the episodes as I keep releasing. So that's going to be good. So Scott, give everybody just a little bit of a backstory of your journey. You mentioned business leader, coaching now. Give us your backstory and let, where you are today.
Yeah. So, if this is for those of you who are watching on video, if anyone, if you're listening, you probably won't have this problem. But if you're watching, you're like, this guy looks like he's about 14 years old. So when I start giving my story, you're like, no, that's not possible. I'm not 14. I'm not, 400 either, but I'm somewhere in between. And in a very short period of time, I've had a lot of experiences happen in my life, and basically ended up owning a share in a company that was built and then almost completely destroyed. And we had to repossess the thing when I was 21 years old.
Oh, wow.
And
yeah, that's
so
like trial by fire right there.
Yes, I ended up 21, a group of people reporting to me, just bad news all around. And, the best news really of all was that it was September of 2008. And so So we get this company back. It's just this really cool idea. We were helping start churches. The name of the company is Start Church, still exists today. Fantastic leadership doing wonderful things. But we did that. We helped churches start all over the country. During my time there, we started about 20,000 different churches, nonprofits, for-profits, the whole works. So it's a big deal, lots of stuff happening. But 2008, it had been bought and then just destroyed, systematically, but unintentionally destroyed. And we get it back, and we've got all this debt from the previous owners. We got a bunch of clients who hadn't been taken care of, and we had no sales and no website. They'd even broken the website somehow. So we're like, well, we're just going to figure it out. And I was young and dumb enough to not care. The other owner, didn't really have another option. He had started the thing and wanted to see it succeed. And so, the first 6 months, stock market dropped by 42%, I think. And we fought through. And so we ran it out of his basement. In many ways, it's not the quintessential founder story, but in many ways it is. It's just against all odds, somehow we make this thing work. And for those of you who know, where our world intersects with predictable success, you had to fight through early struggle for quite a while. Got into fun. It was just a blast. I mean, we were growing by $1 million a year, and every year I'm leading an organization bigger than anything I've ever been part of. I've no idea what I'm doing. And when that happens long enough, 4, 5, 6, I was there 13 years, you feel like you've just walked off the face of the map. Like there is no map for what we're doing. And going back to my comment earlier is, so then you go out and like, well, maybe there's not a map, but there's a guide. And then, you're clumsy at how you find and hire guides. And so you pick the wrong ones. And all of it led me to believe if we couldn't figure it out, it couldn't be figured out. And so we're growing this organization. It's growing like crazy. And then all of a sudden, this thing happens that, we could not put our finger on. We couldn't figure out why it's happening. But every year, our revenue is still climbing and it looks great, but our profit is dropping every single year. And this goes on for 1 year. It's like, oh, that just kind of happened. 2 years, it's like, well, that's not fun.
Right.
And 3 years, is like, okay, there's something really wrong here.
Yeah.
And, again, for the language that you and I are familiar with, we had entered a stage called whitewater, a stage that every successful business goes into. And we were stuck there. I mean, stuck with a capital S. We tried we started reading business books, did all the good to great stuff, nothing. Did all of the Patrick Lencioni stuff, nothing. Did all the traction stuff, nothing.
Right.
And just couldn't figure it out. We reached out to a couple of different coaches and just kept falling flat, and nothing was working, couldn't figure out what's going on. And so I'm listening to a podcast of all things, and this guy with a funny Irish accent is on, and he's talking about the stages that businesses go through. And he starts listing these stages, and he says, whitewater. I'm like, holy cow, we're in whitewater. It makes so much sense.
Right.
And I'm like, what do I do? I have no idea, but we're in whitewater, so I get the book. I'm too lazy to read, so I listen to the audiobook. And, Mr. Romantic that I am, I choose to listen to the audiobook when my wife and I are flying over France on our way to Nice, France, to watch the Formula One race in Monaco. Right? So this is not what you're supposed to be doing. When you're on a trip, gentlemen, when you're on a trip with your wife to go to this wonderfully beautiful exotic location, do not sit on the plane and listen to an audiobook on business life cycles. It is not appropriate. But that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. And again, I get to this chapter on whitewater, and it's like every paragraph is like, where are there's a camera in our office somewhere. How does he know this?
Yes.
It's like it just word for word, problem for problem. And two thoughts hit me almost at the exact same time. The first one is, again, the revelation, which was just life-changing for me. It was like, we're in whitewater. And not only was it we're in whitewater, but it was like, one time I got lost at a mall. I don't know if you remember malls, but those places that had stores inside instead of outside.
That's right.
But so I'm in this mall. I'm a little kid. I can't remember how old I was, but I'm wandering around. It's like my mom's like, meet me at Sears. I have no idea where Sears is, right? So I'm just completely out of my depth. And I finally make my way around, and I find one of those maps. Remember how they always have the big map by the entrance? And on that is this little sticker that says, "You are here." And for the very first time as a business leader, I had that same sensation that it is a little kid of, I know where I am. And because I know where I am, now I know how to get to where I want to go.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
And so it's just this massive revelation for me. The second one that hit right after that was, if I could help other people get out of this same position, as an occupation, every day of my life, I would die a happy man. Right. Like, and that's a weird thought, because whitewater is not fun, right? Like whitewater is, we know it's whitewater because it's not fun. Like by definition, it's not
right.
fun. It like, for people that are in it, profit is disappearing. People are fighting with each other. There's silos. There's folks that are frustrated. There's leaders that are falling apart. There's people that are suing you, or you suing them. Like, just stuff is going wrong everywhere that it possibly can go wrong. And so that's not really the environment that most people want to walk into, but there was just something on it that's like, man, I'd love to do that. And so, like most people who read business books, I did the conscientious thing, and I put it on my shelf. Like,
that's right.
I did nothing with it.
That.
So, yeah, I was like, oh, well, this is it. It explains everything about it. And then I just stuck it on a shelf. Well, it was an audiobook, so it didn't even go on the shelf, but I didn't do anything about it. And we kept going in, and our profit kept declining. One year, our percentage profit dropped in half in a single year. And it's like, okay, nothing that we've tried can get us out. I remember reading this book about whitewater, like, let's just give it a shot. So went in, opened up the book. The back half of the book is, if you're here and you want to get here, here's the directions on how to get there. There's a roadmap. And we just walked through. Poor man's implementation by this point. There wasn't profit to pay, someone to come in. And, I would say, even if we did, I didn't believe in it at the point, but we had nothing left. So we try it out. We walk through these 5 steps that he lays out. And the results were just like, I tell you about them and it doesn't seem believable. We tripled our bottom line in a single year. Amazing. We had to cut off a significant portion of our business, 7-figure part of our business. We cut it off. So we're thinking we're going to have a drop in revenue this year, but it's just necessary to rebuild. Not only did we make that up, we added the same amount of money in profit that we lost in revenue.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
In a single year, but just following, and it had nothing to, like, the 5 things have nothing to do with sales, right? They have nothing to do with marketing. They don't really have to do with fulfillment. What we hadn't done was we hadn't built the business in a way that it was capable of delivering on our promise as a brand.
That's
right?
big.
We hadn't created an environment for the right leaders to really succeed. And when we took these steps, we did them in the right order. It was absolutely revolutionary. So fast forwarding, because we could go on for a really long time, I get the business with my team out of whitewater, and it's just this tremendous thing. We get into a stage called predictable success, and I leave.
Problems are fixed. I'm bored. I'm moving on.
Yeah, I'm instantly bored. So never been diagnosed with ADHD, but it's probably there. And I just realized, like, I had done the thing that I was meant to do at that organization. I finally did the thing I was meant to do. And it was, a hallmark and a precursor for what I was going to do for other organizations. So transitioned the leadership team there, went really, really well. Sold off the company and started out as a scale architect, helping other people to get out of whitewater and to achieve predictable success. I linked up the guy with a funny accent to close the loop is now my dear friend and colleague, McKeown, who created the predictable success model. And he and I now work together to help organizations get out of whitewater into predictable success. We certify other coaches, we train them, and it's the time of my life. I'm so enjoying what I do right now.
It's so good. Well, you hear the passion in it, Scott, which is so much. And that's how you and I connected, because I went through the program to be a certified practitioner, a scale architect. And I had a very similar experience. I was leading a church at the time, bumped into the predictable success book, was like, oh my gosh, this is so what we're navigating, this whitewater thing. It's just so like, I mean, I hear this from clients all the time, is like, it's like, just like you said, is somebody got cameras on us? Because everything that you're talking about right now is exactly what we're experiencing. And so and I love what you said about that, like, you are here button, because what I find over and over, and this is the beauty of the model that Les built, is that it almost like you just take the sigh of relief once when your organization is in like a really difficult spot like whitewater, and you've done everything you know to do as a leader and it's not working. Like, when you read something or hear something that goes, oh my goodness, somebody else has been here and they know the way forward.
Yeah.
It's such a remarkable gift. So that's why, and this, but that's why, a big part of the work that I've done with leaders is that oftentimes we'll use the predictable success model to help us get perspective. Like where are we, what's going on? And then what's required of us as leaders. I love how you said that, when you were leading Start Church to predictable success, is that, when you were in Whitewater, you hadn't created an environment for the right leaders to succeed.
Yeah.
And in that, that's such a huge, I think, piece of what a lot of leaders and probably a lot of listeners feel is like, my leaders aren't succeeding, and why, and sometimes we're grasping for so many different things. And what Les has done, and then what you're building and creating, the team of Scale Architects is really, just creating practitioners who can help guide organizations through this.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, we hear some of the passion points for you in your leadership journey. Any other common threads or things that, just kept bubbling up for you in your leadership journey, that you like, those ahas, those things that you're like, gosh, this is so critical to my success as a leader, if you will.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has always kind of stuck to me is this idea of pulling together people and process. I think most people are kind of naturally inclined to think in terms of people or in terms of process.
That's
right?
Really good. Yeah.
And for me, I'm one of those weird people who's just kind of perennially stuck in between, right? I'm hanging on to both of these things, trying to figure out how to wrestle them together. And so a big part of the problem of Whitewater, and I think why I'm just kind of wired for this environment, is you can't just do it through people alone. That's why I said it's not just about bringing in the right people. There's the who, then what kind of, all of that's fine. We got to get the right people on the team, of course, but we also have to create the right environment for them to thrive and survive. And so there's a process component to that. There's a discipline component to that. There's a stability and a mundaneness actually to all of that, where we have to start doing things in a consistent way. We have to start doing things in a the same way as the person next to us. And when we do that kind of boring process work, but we do it the right way, it provides the freedom for our best people to do their best work. And so that's something that I would never have thought that's where I would land, right? But that's something that I cannot escape. Every environment, when I was CEO of the organization, there's this constant thing for me of, are we creating the environment for our people to succeed? And I think my biggest frustration in Whitewater is I couldn't figure out how to do that. And
that's really discouraging and defeating as a leader.
Yeah. It's massively, because it's like, and I've heard other leaders say this to me before. It's like, I got this great team, but 6 months ago, we just got stupid, right? Like something happened that we just got dumb, and another leader said to me, is like, all the levers that we used to pull on to grow are broken, right? The handles snapped off. Or, another guy said, my crystal ball is a little muddy at the moment. Like there's just something that it just kind of slips in and changes. And it's so phenomenally frustrating because it doesn't make sense. If you don't have that "you are here" moment, if you don't know the Whitewater's coming, if you don't have the language to describe what's going on, it feels like up is down and down is up. And you get the people who want to do the right thing tend to be the ones who struggle the most with it, because it's so personal as well.
Yes. Yeah. That, I think that's what because again, the focus for Foresight is, that investing in that leader and helping them build a great team, so that's kind of the leading edge for us. But what we often find is, when a leader comes to us, they're in a pretty vulnerable place, right? Because it feels personal that this isn't working. And, we all recognize it isn't all about us, but there's an ownership and a responsibility that you feel as a leader when you have this span of care, this team and this organization and mission that you're responsible for, and you don't know what's wrong, and again, the things that you used to do to, the levers used to know how to pull aren't working. It's really unsettling as a leader. And that's where we often bump into leaders is when they're in that place of like, this feels personal. I feel like a failure.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do this. And so it's a big thing. It's a very sensitive thing. Like I feel like it's a really critical moment for leaders.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think especially my world is heavily skewed toward founders, right? Which is a subset of leaders. And I think it's especially true for them because, their business is their baby, right?
Yeah.
Their business is as much an extension of them as their child is.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get frustrated by it because it affects everything about our life, right? It's not just our business. It's not just our job. It's something about, we feel flawed in who we are.
Yeah.
And so again, I don't think the goal is to detach those things, right? It's not to take ourselves out of work. It's to actually integrate those more fully.
Yeah.
And again, I think the recipe for that is getting people and process working together in harmony.
I was going to say, I love that. Like that, even what you described earlier, it's kind of that like wrestle of it's both and it's people and process. And, oftentimes when we're doing some of our culture work, one of the phrases we use all the time is clarity is the chief indicator of the health of a culture. Mm-hmm. And clarity is really bringing clarity to a lot of process. When we start digging in, we realize there's so many things that are unclear to team members, and that and a lot of that has to do with process. We need to be really clear about systems or processes or org chart, or, that these things need to be clear because then it equips team members to know how to succeed. Right. Yes. So then it does unleash our people to know how to succeed and move forward. What are some of the, when you encounter that leader who is feeling defeated, discouraged, stuck, what are some of the first things you do to help first encourage them, like to give them some hope, right? And then start leading them forward in that work?
Yeah. There's two places where this tends to happen from my world. There's 4 places that it happens overall, but where we tend to see this, especially for leaders, is especially for founders, again, which is the majority of my world, is the very, very first stage, early struggle. Mm-hmm. It's just like waking up every morning and just kind of banging your head on a sharp corner, right? Like it's just, we've glorified starting businesses and being an entrepreneur, but the reality of it is it's pretty miserable, quite honestly, at the beginning. And so some folks, not even by virtue of doing the wrong thing, but by not knowing the right thing, can get stuck there for a while. Yeah. And they start to think, well, that's all that owning a business is, right? It's being stuck in this early struggle stage. And same thing for whitewater. When folks, get through the fun stage, it's a lot of fun. We feel like we can't do anything wrong. We're just crushing it. And it's just add a sales rep, revenue goes up. Everything's wonderful. All of a sudden we're in whitewater. We didn't change anything. Like, why is this breaking all of a sudden? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing happening there. Is they get stuck there not because they're making the wrong choices, although that's a part of it, but they don't know what choices to make.
Right.
I was working with a team yesterday and they're like, we know we have gaps, but we don't know what they are. Right. Like, mm-hmm. And we don't know which ones are the most important. And so the really wonderful thing about my job is that no matter where they are, right, if they come to me and they're in a bad point, like it looks a lot better where they can go, right? Like the destination is way, way better. And so for me, it's what I do. It's our model. And so it sounds a little self-serving, but it isn't. But the model of these life cycle stages is the foundation for everything that we do. And so if I can show someone, hey, you feel that way because you're stuck in this stage.
Right.
And you're stuck in this stage because you're doing these things, but you really need to be doing these things. And when we do these things, it's going to be hard, right? It might be some stuff we have to unwind. We had to cut $1 million business. I had to fire 3 of my best friends who were leaders. Like it'll be hard, but on the back side of that, it doesn't feel like this anymore.
Right.
For the vast majority of us, we tend to feel, whether we're in good times or bad times, that the rest of our time will be like they are right now. Right. It's like, we're in one of these good times. It's like, we're not thinking about getting a coach or whatever, because it's like, well, it'll always be this way. It's just up and to the right. Or if it's bad, like we deny it for a little while, then we realize it's there. And then we feel like we're trapped forever. And so for me, I think it's just helping people, and again, using the model, but helping them recognize what they're feeling is a symptom of a stage, not a reality of business. Right.
Yes.
It's not something you have to accept. Maybe you have to accept it in the moment,
Right.
we are here, right? We may be in Kansas. We're trying to get to New York. We're in Kansas, right?
Yep.
But you don't have to stay there, right? You can make tangible steps, and it's the same steps, right? It's not a mystery. Like, there is a roadmap. And so if I can come in and say, hey, here's where we are, here's where you want to go. Great. Here's the steps to get there. And we just make phenomenal progress in a few months. And it's the biggest delight in my life is seeing that emotional transition. Like, because folks don't come to me feeling wonderful, right? Like, you just don't buy what I do if everything's great. And so I tend to get folks who just really, they feel beat up. And a lot of them are questioning, hey, I don't know, like, I like you. What you're saying is cool. I don't know that that's possible for me. Right. It feels personal. It feels singular. And knowing what I know now, having started so many different organizations, having worked with so many others, it has so little to do with who you are as an individual. Right. It's not fatalistic. Like, you're not wired to be terrible, right? You're not destined for mediocrity. Like, it's none of those things. It's just that you haven't recognized the game has changed around you and you haven't responded to it. So if I can show you, here's the game, you're going to do great at it.
That's so good.
And so I would say the big thing for folks is to recognize it's up to you to fix it, but it's not that you're wired in a fundamentally wrong way.
That's big. Yeah. Yeah. And I think so many leaders, just like when you get to that spot, being able to hear that, and depersonalize it, and we could go, here's the plan. And that's such a huge resource. I'm shifting gears a little bit on you because I want to get your perspective on this before we have to wrap up. What do you think leaders should be paying attention to right now? We're in such a unique stage, right? It's like, we're, I think, kind of post-COVID, but we've got all this, just economic shifting and questions and, potential recession. And like, there's just so much conversation around that. I'm curious what you see or are noticing or think leaders need to be paying attention to, with just still kind of a very like uncertain kind of climate right now. Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'll sound a little bit like I'm, just beating a drum that has one note. But the reality of it is, like, I think the most important question that we can ask in a business is when, right? So your idea of right now, I think right now it's really hard to draw any kind of vague generalization, because I was just talking to someone in the church world and they're still struggling to get back to where they were beforehand. Yeah. Right. A couple times before that, I was dealing with a business who, like, they just cannot keep up. Right. And another one, like, they're stuck with supply chain. So the reality of it is, everyone, even if you're in the same industry, is all over the place. So
that's true. Yeah.
Again, for me, it's okay. What stage are we in? What stage are we leaning toward? Right. Because you can have two organizations, same industry, maybe even the same size. If one of them is leaning toward this whitewater period, right, and another one's maybe on the other side, a little over processed, a little bureaucratic, they're in this treadmill side, like, they may be in the same industry dealing with the same external factors, but internally they're responding to them in equal but opposite, wrong but equally wrong, opposite but equally wrong ways.
Sure.
Right.
Okay. Yep.
And so if a treadmill over processed one, what they're going to try and do is they're going to try and process their way out of the problem.
Right.
This kind of whitewater entrepreneurial, they're going to try and vision their way out of the problem. Yes. Right. We're just going to ram it through and crush it through. And so what happens when we're in these turbulent times, we have a tendency to go onto autopilot, but autopilot will never produce the prime result. Right. It will always cause us to drift out of, the stage that we call predictable success, out of the prime ability of the organization. And so we've got to be really cognizant of what our autopilot is, or where the tides are pushing us, especially when they're moving around, and using a model like the predictable success model to really always give us a sense of true north is irreplaceable in times when there's so much uncertainty and so much external change.
That's good.
What we try to do is just kind of blame external change for, our shoddy leadership. And the reality of it is, like, again, and there's two restaurants just down the road from me, one closed and one's thriving. Right. They both sell food. They're both in the same location. The one that's thriving is saying, like, we fought really hard to do it. The one that fails, like, oh, it was COVID. Well, okay, but you both ran into the same challenges. It's far less to do with what's happening outside. It's what you're doing to respond to it.
That's
and so to do that, though, you have to know where you're at and where you're trying to get to.
Really helpful, Scott. So good. I know you've probably stirred a bunch of questions for people. How can we connect with you more? What's a great next step for folks that are hearing this going, that resonates? I need to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. Best thing to do is head to scalearchitects.com. On that homepage, you'll find all kinds of resources just out to wazoo. But two to pay attention to are the life cycle quiz. So anyone who wants to know what, he's talking about all these stages, what does that mean? If you take the life cycle quiz, it'll tell you what stage you're in. It'll give you a report on, okay, here's what you need to do about it and to get out of it. So you'll find that there. There's also one on leadership styles, which is super, super effective for anyone at any level in an org chart. If you're wanting to lead, you're wanting to do it better, self-awareness is a huge part of that. So it's all on that page. Again, there's resources out to wazoo, but scalearchitects.com is a great place to start. Perfect.
Awesome. And people have probably heard me from time to time speak of a lot of the predictable success model, because we're just such believers in it. And every time I listen to you, I learn more, just because you have just immersed yourself so much in this and you're helping so many organizations with it. So thanks for joining us. I'm really grateful for our friendship and the opportunity to keep growing and learning together. And so glad that you joined us today, Scott. This was fantastic.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Jenni. Thank you.